Mahaba, assalamu alaikum, welcome and peace be with you. We know that adaptation is one of the most important topics here at COP27 this year. We know that adaptation finance is not yet where it needs to be. And we know that there is huge need for adaptation finance, in particular in the global south. This panel is focused on how can business and government team together to create stronger, multifaceted adaptation finance solutions. This week, the COP27 presidency launched the Sharm el-Sheikh Adaptation Agenda in partnership with the high-level champions. The agenda outlines 30 adaptation outcomes to enhance resilience for 4 billion people living in the most vulnerable, climate-vulnerable communities by 2030. These include, number one, transitioning to climate-resilient, sustainable agriculture that can increase yields by 17% and reduce farm-level greenhouse gases by 21% without expanding agricultural frontiers and while improving livelihoods, including of smallholder farmers. Two, protecting and restoring an estimated 400 million hectares in critical areas of land and freshwater ecosystems, supporting indigenous and local communities with use of nature-based solutions to improve water security and livelihoods to transform 2 billion hectares of land into sustainable management. And lastly, protecting 3 billion people by installing smart and early warning systems of climatic disasters. Whilst this panel hopes to achieve is to highlight the adaptation finance success stories and Africa's amazing assets and the opportunities in this space for all of us. In addition, to highlight the incredible work that is already underway. In doing so, through understanding what is already working, we hope that we can all scale up investment in this space. So, our panelists today, Her Excellency, Dr. Fouad, Minister of Environment of the Arab Republic of Egypt, who joins us with more than 18 years' experience working in government, in UN organizations, NGOs, and universities. Ms. Al-Sheiby, Senior Director, Strategic Planning and Economic Services Department for the OPEC Fund. Ms. Knight, MENA Regional Head of Commercial Banking for HSBC. And Ms. Lofts, EY's Global Sustainable Finance Leader. So, let us begin. As we mentioned, this year there has been particular emphasis on adaptation and the need to mobilize adaptation finance to the global south. To put this into context, Dr. Fouad, as Minister of Environment of the Arab Republic of Egypt, could you give us an idea of the scale of funding that is needed, or in other words, the size of opportunity for adaptation finance in the global south generally, but also more specifically in Egypt, and how the government of Egypt is addressing this? Dr. Fouad.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. And it's really a pleasure to participate in this panel after the opening of the Adaptation and Agriculture Day. And one of the things that I have been mentioning in my opening remarks in that day was the role of the private sector, commercial banks, and MDBs in adaptation, as that has been always the challenge, though we're trying to strive hard to keep progress to agree on the global goal on adaptation within the negotiation tracks. Different reports that came out from the IPCC and from the Global Center for Adaptation that has identified the figures that would be needed for adaptation. Let us take where I belong to, which is the Africa as a continent. Africa is most vulnerable to the impact of climate change. If we come to see the figures, we would see that between 20 and 50 billion is needed per year under the scenario of the 1.5 by 2050. But that would be even doubled or tripled between 18 and 60 billion per year, just over the 2 degrees Celsius, and from 100 to 437 billion per year for the 4 degrees scenario. So there is that linkage between the mitigation and the adaptation, and we cannot, at that world, in this crisis, select either or. This is number one. Number two, for the global south, the more that they are able to mitigate, the more we will still be able to adapt. It's not that only adaptation would be the solution for that. But what is important is to build the resilience of the people through having that kind of the finance that is needed. And I would like to open a bracket here on the finance before going to the case of Egypt. The finance does not only mean the public or even the finance that comes from the international organization, but the role of the private sector. The case of Egypt that came up in this COP yesterday is something to be taken as a model and replicated. We say water and food are most challenges of adaptation. We're still not able to make that bankable ones, and how the MDBs can get involved. What Egypt has done through its strategy and NDC is that it came up with a program on energy, water, and food nexus. Energy is bankable, private sector can be there, and affordable technologies. So that program has the renewable energy as a basis, and couple that with water and food. So the renewable energy that you're getting out, you're using that for the production of the land, and you're using renewable for the water desalination. That is a very unique experience because it gives one step further for the private sector to get into the investment. Secondly, the role of the MDBs to go in with de-risking the policy and the financial tools for the private sector, and give that balance between mitigation and adaptation, providing also more job opportunities into that regard.
Wow, thank you, Dr. Fouad. I love the way that you brought that alive with real examples as well. And the number that sticks in my head from the start of your response was that $437 billion of 4 degrees. So, well, on the back of a request for maybe $437 billion, maybe we can turn to you, Ms. Al-Sheiby. From your perspective at the OPEC fund, where do you see the biggest opportunities in scaling this funding?
Thank you. Good morning to everybody. Good morning to Dr. Fouad. So building on what Dr. Fouad was saying, I'll just give you a brief overview of the OPEC Fund first. So the OPEC Fund for International Development is a global MDB. We were established in 1976, have 46 years of track record, over 125 countries. We partner with only partner countries, so we are a differentiating factor of the OPEC fund is we do not lend to our member countries. So it's based on pure South-South cooperation. Because we're small and we cover 125 countries, so our cumulative commitments are $22 billion, and in the world of MDBs, that's rather small. We have built our business model on amplifying impact through partnerships. So we basically use the business model of partnerships on steroids. We partner with all MDBs, UN agencies, in order to be able to deliver our mandate. Over the past years, we have been very agile and very nimble, and we've introduced recently 2 key initiatives that I'd like to share with you. The first is in response to the Russia-Ukraine war and the food insecurity crisis, we've introduced our Food Security Action Plan, where we topped up our traditional business plan with $1 billion. And key to this is that we were able to mobilize $10 billion from the Arab Coordination Group, which is the bilateral and multilateral arms of OPEC member countries. Similarly, as, I mean, when you hear the word OPEC, of course, you assume oil, but we are a pure MDB, and our member countries, from Saudi Arabia that suffers sand and dust storms, from Nigeria to Indonesia that have also not been spared the adversity, we have approved our climate action plan. And that happened in mid-September. And our climate action plan intends to double all our funding from now until 2030 for climate finance, bringing that to around 40% of our portfolio. It is earmarked for mitigation, adaptation, and therefore we have to start working. We've also, for COP27, to support the government of Egypt, the presidency, we were also able to mobilize, with a ratio of 1 to 6, $24 billion from the Arab Coordination Group. And this money is available and ready to work in response to climate mitigation and adaptation. So, talking about adaptation, the OPEC fund is, its portfolio currently stands at 20% for climate finance, of which 15% are for mitigation and 5% for adaptation. And as you can see, adaptation, we can do much better there. We've, however, had, despite the small scale of adaptation, we've had strong support in the agriculture sector, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, as well as in countries in Asia like Vietnam and Bangladesh, as well as, of course, in Argentina and other countries in Latin America. We've also been quite successful in the water supply and sanitation sector, as well as the transport sectors, and these are the sectors that we see the greatest possibility for upgrading adaptation financing. Thank you.
Wow, well, thank you. Now, I know you said $22 billion doesn't make you feel very big, but I think to many people in your audience, $22 billion sounds very large. And I love that phrasing of partnerships on steroids. I know it's a great way. And Ms. Lofts, I'd like to come to you now on partnerships, because it's clear to all of us that cooperation between public and private sector will be incredibly important. So how do you think we can achieve better public and private sector collaboration on adaptation financing?
Thank you, Steve. And I just want to say hello to everybody, and how proud I am to be on an all-female panel. Such an excellent group of ladies. So maybe just give a few perspectives from the private finance sector to begin with. Adaptation finance is not well defined. The metrics around it are not well defined either. And whilst there are some standards evolving, you know, again, there's more work that potentially could be done there. And financial services, private sector typically likes to work in structured, well-defined, a sectoral type of approach. So I think one of the challenges that we face in terms of bringing the private finance sector along is how do they measure their involvement? How do they measure the success? How do they measure it on an ongoing basis? We've talked about innovation in the private finance sector, in particular for adaptation finance, around not just looking at outputs, so not just looking at financial metrics, but looking at social metrics and broader environmental metrics as well. And I think we will see more and more of that. Now, there are collaborations. One that I wanted to mention is an insurance company collaborating with the Nature Conservancy and regional governments in Mexico to protect the local barrier reef from extreme hurricane, where we see an MDB, an NGO, and private finance working together. So I think there will be roles not just for impact investing, but also for insurance and commercial banking. But I think, as I said before, there's going to need to be financial innovation between the private sector, the MDBs, the NGOs, in order to create blended finance and adaptation that is scalable and can be moved at pace.
Thank you, Ms. Lofts. And now I think it's probably time to hear from private sector financing. So we're delighted to be joined by Ms. Knight, who's Sustainable Finance Head for HSBC in the region. So maybe start at the strategy level for us, Ms. Knight. What's the bank's strategic approach to adaptation financing?
Thank you, Steve, and I'm delighted to be joining you all today. Thank you to the Minister for joining us and my fellow esteemed panelists. So on adaptation finance, this is a really tricky one, right? Because we know very clearly the adaptation topics to take into account, but it's quite difficult to operationalize a methodology to create the financing mechanisms to get the whole thing going. So what HSBC have done is set out a net zero ambition, which we did a few years ago now, and have a holistic plan to be able to deliver that by both setting targets against the emissions of the companies that we're financing, but also look at investing in climate solutions and innovation that will tackle the adaptation agenda. So the other thing to take into account is the role of nature within adaptation. So mangroves, for instance, have a co-benefit of being a carbon sink and a resilient coastal barrier for storm surges, and also sort of built environment adaptation. So, for instance, harbour defences, whereby there's a significant investment cost attached with that as well. What we're doing is looking at how to create funds that can really address adaptation directly. So HSBC Asset Management teamed up with Pollination, a climate advisory company, to create climate asset management. And that entity is looking at nature-based solutions projects and projects within agriculture, water, and coastal systems to be able to provide the direct funding. But what we really want to do is rewire the financial system in the same way that we're doing for emissions profiles for adaptation thinking. And I'll come on to that point in a second when we talk about data.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let's stick with the people that have the money. Let's come back to the OPEC fund. Are there any examples of successful platforms or vehicles of adaptation finance that you've seen work successfully? And how do you think we can replicate those projects?
Thank you. So actually, I just would like to share with you a couple of success stories and then an initiative and how we can replicate the initiative. So the success stories are that we have across Asia Pacific developed and supported adaptation through supporting water supply and sanitation sectors. So I'll give an example of Maldives, for example. The government of Maldives realized that we did a lot of work on the water supply and sanitation in Bangladesh and reached out to the OPEC fund because of our South-South tool, which basically to just ask for support. How can we support water supply and sanitation in our huge archipelago, around 90 islands that we needed that are uninhabited? What we did is that we introduced a master plan, a water supply and sanitation master plan. We did the assessment for the entire archipelago. We developed a pilot, and to ensure that each of these inhabited islands would have water supply and sanitation and a harbor with a clear adaptation component. We replicated that over all 90 islands. The OPEC fund itself, along with the ACG, financed 52 islands, but because of the fact that we have supported their strategy, created a master plan, Islamic Bank was able to take on some of the projects. This was also taken up by the Asian Development Bank because the information was available. I know you're going to ask a question now later on about data. I know that this topic we've discussed extensively, but information and supporting governments put policies in place for adaptation is very important and is a tool that MDBs can really support with. Another example is Argentina. So in Argentina, we're the largest water supply and sanitation developer in, as MDB in two provinces of Cordoba and Santa Fe. And again, this was replicated by the government of Argentina, and of course you could see in the food security crisis that these two provinces were really the largest exporters of grain. We have the same approach and same success stories in transport and in agriculture in sub-Saharan Africa. But what I'd like to pick on what the panelists said and just say that from the point of view of MDBs, we realize that no matter how big our funding is, that it is insufficient if we're not able to de-risk and attract private capital. And as MDBs, of course, we do work in a myriad of countries, so a large spectrum from middle-income countries that are well-rated, that have the capacity, to least developed countries. And now I'd just like to share with you a small initiative that we have that I believe is very successful. So we've developed a hub, a climate finance hub and energy transition for least developed countries in Africa. And this is very interesting because it's an end-to-end policy to finance hub. And what we do here is that we've partnered with Sustainable Energy for All and UN agencies in order to start from the very beginning, develop the policies. So SE for All is supporting the countries develop their NDCs. And then we do project preparation and bankable projects because the private sector will not come without bankability. And then we have a de-risking component in order to ensure private capital, where we back it up with sovereign loans from us and from the Arab Coordination Group. Now, such an initiative would be easily replicated in terms of adaptation for example, small farmer holders in Africa. Also, where we would be able to provide or support the small farmer holders, obtain private capital to plant drought-resilient crops. Also, for example, in Asia, we've been approached to have a similar setup with the de-risking component because of the salt intrusions in Vietnam, so to support, again, with agriculture. So these are all initiatives that can be replicated and would require the de-risking components for private capital to come in. Thank you.
Those are fantastic examples. I'm sure you'd all agree, and I'm really captured by that phrase of south-to-south cooperation of this as well. And let's stick with the idea of priority areas and priority sectors. Let's come to you, Ms. Lofts. Now, we know that this year it is being called the Implementation COP, and there's been a focus on how we take action to mobilize capital and act on the commitments that have been made, not just now, but in previous COPs as well. So with this in mind, and given the scale of the required adaptation financing needed, what do you believe are the priority areas for adaptation? For example, are there any specific sectors or types of projects that should be prioritized when mobilizing capital for adaptation?
Thanks, Steve. Great question. And as I said previously, so the financial services sector does look at the real economy from a sectoral approach. So it's quite natural for them to take that lens. But of course, this issue is much more complicated than that. I have spent the past 5 days with financial services institutions. We've had quite a lot of roundtable discussion around how there is a wall of money there to be deployed to the Global South for climate finance, for mitigation and adaptation. How do we get that to the right places at the right pace? And so we can pick topics like deforestation or afforestation and farming. And I think to some extent, we probably do need some global themes in order to get the financing moving. But at the same time, we know that this is very localized, and we know that the impacts are much more complex than, as I said before, there's social impacts and there's much broader environmental impacts. So I would say in summary, I think we should be taking some of the most urgent themes like agriculture and afforestation, but then also looking at where are the geographies and the peoples that need the help the most urgently, and how can we create that scale and that momentum, working with the MDBs, working with governments, and working with the private sector. I think it's very tricky, and Zoe mentioned, I think you mentioned rewiring financing. We definitely believe that needs to happen. It's very complicated, and I think collaboration, discussion, and just working out how to do that is going to be critical.
Thank you, Ms. Lofts. And let's come back to you, Dr. Fouad. I'm going to mix my metaphors now. Ms. Lofts talked about a wall of money. Now let's talk about technology and data lakes, because we know that data, a large amount of data is required to make these decisions on. And that's one of the challenges for adaptation financing, is to make sure that we have the right data and the right quality of data. So Dr. Fouad, in Egypt, what types of data does the government view as most valuable when considering adaptation and driving adaptation finance opportunities?
Thank you very much. We cannot say that the only data that we would need is the data that is derived from the technical development sectors, meaning that it's not only the agriculture or the water-related data, which is the regular type of things that we collect to report back on our sustainable development plans, but also the socio-economic data on the linkages, for an example, between devastating floods or showers like rains that would come and occur all of a sudden, and how much of the people were affected, would be very much needed, for example, when we are preparing the proposals for funding. Secondly, and that has to be there because that is a part of working on that package. For example, early this week, the number of days are hilarious for me.
I think we all feel like this.
So early this week, we launched with the World Bank the Climate Change Diagnostic Report. And that report had that linkages between adaptation, water and food, and its linkage to the economic status, the GDP, and the social aspects of the communities in Egypt, especially in Upper Egypt. Secondly, part of our exercise that we needed to do even before hosting the COP, we felt that it's very important to collect various data on climate and go ahead and develop a vulnerability assessment map. A vulnerability assessment map, it's used the models for the IPCC, and by the way, these are the challenges that the Global South would see, is that taking the modeling from the IPCC and try to tailor that within the local and the national context, that's very difficult. It took us, by the way, 2 years to adapt that kind of a model. But 3 days ago, we just launched our first vulnerability assessment map that would assess the investment in every single land in Egypt up till 2100. That is very important because part of getting an adaptation finance, when you still lack a definition for the global goal on adaptation and you still lack a definition for adaptation finance, is to provide evidence of how many inhabitants would be benefiting from that project. So having that assessment and collecting those kind of data, I think this is a very good experience that Egypt would like to share with the Global South. Thank you.
That's a great example. Let's stick with data, I think. Let's come back to the private sector. Let's come back to you, Ms. Knight. From your experience, can you tell us about some of the industry initiatives that you have seen to address this lack of data and what you want to see more of in terms of how we collect and collate that data?
Thank you. So one of the most important things to solve the climate crisis is transparency, and it's transparency around a whole lot of issues, right? It's transparency about capital flows and whether or not they're being deployed effectively for both mitigation and adaptation. And there's a need for the information to provide that transparency. Data is also really mission critical to be able to assess impact. So the financial system as a whole is trying to work out how to get better at talking about impacts, the impact of where financial flows are going, whether that's, again, emission reduction or adaptation and resilience to build up strength to counter any negative consequences of a 1.5 degree temperature rise. The reason that we're so focused on the data in particular is that it helps us to make decisions much more effectively. Now, if you rewind back 5 years ago and think about how climate has been integrated into financial decision making, the first step was about looking at climate risk. So the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures was really pivotal at providing information that helped us distinguish which assets might be most at risk in the future. So fast forwarding 5 years from that, we now have the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. And this really means that we can bring environmental risks as an ecosystem risk into our financial thinking, which again is helpful at driving knowledge across the sector and capacity building across the sector to start taking these things into account. So whilst we don't think that data restrictions or data gaps should be an excuse for inaction, for sure. It should 100% not be an excuse for inaction. It definitely helps the industry as a whole move faster if we have more complete information around how financial flows are moving and how financial flows can support adaptation issues.
Thank you. So a plea for more complete financial information, the data that will fuel better decision making and better judgment on risks. Let's come back to the world of MDBs, Ms. Al-Sheiby. So we've heard a lot this week so far about the importance of implementation. And I was really interested to hear you mention earlier the launch of the Arab Coordination Group Fund, which draws together funding commitments of at least or over $20 billion by 2030, of which your OPEC fund is a part. So how do you see private and public sector best engaging with each other when it comes to the planning of adaptation projects and making sure this funding can be used to implement such projects? Could this engagement have any positive impacts on the financing of the adaptation projects? So back to engagement.
Thank you. So, of course, you know, countries, MDBs and philanthropies have a pivotal role to play together. So, first of all, like the government of Egypt has done with the Nuwafi program, I think that the first step is for governments to get the support of MDBs and UN agencies to conclude their NDCs. And based on these, then provide a strategy for the country, like Nuwafi, with the related pipeline of operations. This brings us to the next step. The next step would be to go ahead and present this pipeline to MDBs so that they can create a bankable pipeline, produce so do the feasibility studies, support with ESG, support with procurement, to actually be able to bring that project to life. And the next step is then the financing. And financing here, again, the sovereign financing is there from MDBs, and this would be de-risking for private capital participation.
Got it. Right. I want to come back to private sector, then I'm going to come back to Dr. Fouad, but let's come back to Ms. Knight. Let's lift up a level again and just talk about other financial products, other ways of financing. So in your role with HSBC, Ms. Knight, and expertise with capital markets, are there any lessons that we could learn from label product markets like green bonds that could be applied to adaptation and adaptation financing?
Thank you. Now, again, I think this is a really important topic, and Having worked in financial markets for so long and seen the birth of the green bond market and the sustainability-linked loan market and bond market, there was a lot of challenge in the earlier days about green labelling of financial instruments, because the viewpoint was, actually, we don't need to label stuff. The capital's been allocated anyway, so why do we need to put a wrapper on it? What actually happened with calling out the activities linked to a particular set of financing meant that it really built capacity and capabilities within our organisations and across the financial system as a whole. So the labelling activity in itself provided, one, a signal that a seriousness of intent was in place in terms of addressing climate goals, and also an educational toolkit as to what green really meant. See the same benefit being applied to adaptation finance. It's still in such nascent stages in terms of how colleagues within our organisations understand adaptation. And therefore, by calling out what an adaptation project looks like and what an adaptation activity is, means that we can scale up the market a lot faster than we otherwise would. And I think it's really important to provide that toolkit to colleagues that perhaps their day job isn't climate finance, and their day job might even be compliance or risk, or not even financing related in terms of the sort of deal front of market activities. It's about bringing all of that together. And the other thing that I want to do whilst having the liberty of sitting here is to really congratulate Egypt on the linkage between the investment roadmap and the NDC, because that really charts a direction of travel that investors can look at and say, okay, I get that this mitigation activity is over here and this adaptation activity is over here, and this is the funding that's needed to make that happen. So congratulations on that.
That's well said, Ms. Snyder. Let's just reinforce that point of the roadmap that the Egyptian government have published, that links those targets and adaptation projects and financing to the nationally determined contributions to the NDCs is a best practice we'd like many other countries to follow as well. And Dr. Fouad, let's give you the penultimate question. Then I'm going to ask all of our panelists the same question to close out. So it's been great to see state representatives, civil society, youth, women, vulnerable groups, and the private sector all together here at COP27. I'm sure we're all aware of the Egyptian government's recently launched initiatives, such as the Climate Smart Agriculture for Life project, which brings gender at the center of climate adaptation efforts and empowers vulnerable women through building climate resilience. From your perspective, Dr. Fouad, are you able to share with us all more on the role of women, specifically in achieving these adaptation goals?
Thank you very much. Maybe being a woman and being in that leading position at the center of a COP, and have been a lot preparing for that COP, women are the most vulnerable to the impact of climate change. And believe it or not, those are in the rural areas are completely different and facing different challenges than those are the urban cities. First, on the issue related to the water and sanitation, that's one thing. Agriculture and production and providing food. Third, on the health issues and making sure that their children in the neighborhood are feeling well. So health, agriculture, and water are at the heart of the adaptation. And for that perspective, we felt that it's very important that Egypt presidency would present the gender initiative called the CAP at the heart of COP27 in the Gender Day with linkage on adaptation. Today, on Saturday, we're working on the thematic day of agriculture and adaptation, and that's why Monday will be the day for gender and water. They are all connected together, and that's very important. Secondly, the social aspect that was never brought in different COPs. We've been talking about gender empowerment and women empowerment. How can we get women more resilient to the impact? We talked about mitigation and adaptation from the holistic point of view, but we never touched on the adaptation in women and providing more economic opportunities and more social integration into that part. And that's the beauty of the gender initiative that we're providing, getting rural communities, focusing on water and agriculture, which is the heart of adaptation, tackling that from the perspective of green economy and economic opportunities and providing more jobs for women in that. So you're hitting many targets at the same time. Thank you.
I think that's a great theme of providing more economic opportunities for women. And I hope all of you on Monday take the time out to go to the Egyptian Pavilion. I think there's some activity also in the main plenary session on this agenda. I think that'd be a very good use of your time. But now we're going to start wrapping up. So the question to each of the panelists, and we'll start maybe with you, Ms. Lofts. If you think about now the journey to COP28, I know we've not finished COP27 yet, but think about 12 months on. So I want to give each of you an opportunity to share your vision. What will we have achieved specifically on this agenda? Why don't you go first, Ms. Lofts, and just carry on down the line to Dr. Fouad. So where's your vision for where we'll be at COP28 on this agenda?
Thanks, Steve. I think it's really obvious that private finance needs to be rewired in order to get climate finance going at scale and adaptation finance going at scale. So my wish is we find a mechanism, or maybe multiple mechanisms, like the recently announced Egyptian plan, where we find powerful mechanisms to do that. And then the second one is that we find lighthouse projects, case studies, so that we can illuminate to the rest of the world, the rest of society, how this can be done.
Thank you. So, I mean, I totally agree. I think that the 3 pillars of our climate action plan are actually our hopes from now until COP28. So the first is on policies, that governments conclude their NDCs or update them. The second is to have clear, bankable pipelines of projects on mitigation and adaptation. And the third is to rewire the global financial architecture to make it fit for purpose to ensure private sector participation.
And heartily agree with all of that. It would just be fantastic if we get the global adaptation goal up and running. I think that would be a great move forward.
Definitely the global goal on adaptation, but more updated NDCs and more focused programming of translation of those NDCs similar to the energy, water and food nexus. It's a very magnificent solution to the problem of challenges for adaptation finance. Start coupling mitigation as a basis, take it as a win, and put over that the 2 sectors that you think more relevant to your people, and having that within the COP28, moving from the implementation with that human-centered approach, looking at human needs at the heart of the climate action to COP28 will really accelerate the implementation process. Thank you.
Well, I'm sure you all agree that's a great list of success factors that maybe together we can submit to our Emirati host for COP28. We'll take care of that, I think, but if anybody wants to join in, that'll be fantastic. What have I taken away from this? Well, 2 phrases in particular. I really like this idea of a partnership on steroids. And then also, as Dr. Fouad said, a human-centered approach to adaptation finance, specifically, I would say, with finding greater economic opportunities for women through these programs, through these projects. Please join me in thanking all of our panelists, Ms. Lofts, Ms. Al-Sheiby, Ms. Knight, and Her Excellency Dr. Fouad. Thank you for your panel. Thank you for your time. If you have a second, do we do a photo, Sarah, together?